Welcome back to Module 2, and here I'm going to give you an overview of rent-to-own Canada and talk about the market opportunities that exist across the country for this type of investment. So I should really start off as what exactly rent-to-own is, and while the name would seem that it's self-explanatory, there really is a market niche that does exist for investors. You would most likely think about buying an investment property. You're renting it out to tenants, providing them the opportunity for housing security while at the same time paying down your investment. But what Rent-to-Own Canada does, there's a sweet spot actually that's being created in the market whereby the opportunity to be able to have vetted tenant owners with security into a property, as well as your ownership of the property, and giving them a path or a journey to get to whereby they can successfully exit and you can successfully exit as well. And so if you think about it from a traditional sense, you would be buying a property on behalf of a tenant owner. You would still enter into a lease agreement with them, but where the difference lies is that there's another added contract into the deal, which is an option to purchase. And the option to purchase spells out their ability to purchase the home at a future appreciated price within a certain amount of time period. And so, for instance, you would have a lease agreement, but then you would also have that option to purchase agreement that combined with their initial deposit, or it's also your security in the deal, over the course of, let's say it was a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, 36 months or 60 months, they would be paying each month to help them arrive at a goal of 21% to be able to have them successfully exit upon completion of the contracts. And so where we change with a business model perspective is that we very much are driven to set the tenant owners up for success. So that means through our qualification process of finding a tenant owner, it doesn't mean that we're qualifying everybody. Typically we look at, not typically, we actually look at household income, we look at employment history, we look at CRA filings, and we essentially look to vet these tenant owners to make sure that they will be successful. We wouldn't enter into a tenant owner relationship with them or yourself unless they were very much set up for success. Most often what you will find is that folks who are in the program are either recently separated or divorced and they need time to rebuild their credit once again, or they are self-employed and they need time through their self-employment to be able to build up that history with the traditional aid lenders for them to be able to purchase their home outright. And in this marketplace that we are sitting in, the challenge for these folks who that are, we recognize and call them as tenant owners, the challenge is that with housing being a scarce commodity in Canada, it is not easy for them to find necessarily the right place to rent. And further, they are just on the outside of qualifying to buy. And so if you can picture this business relationship that we have acts as a bridge for people looking for housing security and looking to move into financial security with their homes and really ultimately for their family. At the end of the day, when we talk about our core values, we're driven by transparency, trust today, and that is what our pursuit is as we go and get them into the secured asset class and get you into the secured asset class. So I just kind of wanted to explain some of the nomenclature that I'm using when I'm speaking about these folks that are in our circles within Rent-to-Own Canada. So obviously the partners that we're talking about, there's us, and what we do is that we provide the expertise, we bring the people to the table, the tenant owners to the table, we help with facilitation, and we help with the management. Then there's the tenant owner, which I've been speaking quite often about. The tenant owners are actually the clients, or specifically the tenants, that we are looking to place within new house and get them on the path to home ownership within traditionally a 3 year to 5 year period. The friend investor, that's you. And the reason why we call you folks a friend investor is that you're offering a hand up to them while you are also looking to get strong returns on your investment. And so that's why we refer to you as a friend investor, because this is really a strategic partnership in helping to facilitate their success along with your success. And then the last term that we kind of use in our nomenclature is partners of excellence. So if you are aware of the processes that it takes to buy a house, or logistics behind it, there are insurance providers, there are realtors, there are lawyers, and what we have established is all across the country, again in the 9 provinces, we've established relationships with realtors, we've established relationships with the insurance companies, and we've established relationships with lawyers in order to make this process seamless. You might also think that that's just top level, and you are right. There's also thinking about, what about home inspections? What about doing water testing? Again, we cover all of that, and that is through our management expertise that we've built these relationships over the last 25 years, but ultimately with Rent to Own Canada these last 5.5 years. So that is essentially at a high level how Rent to Own works. To summarize, we are identifying a tenant owner that qualifies for a program to be able to rent a property and then have a lease option on it to purchase over the course of a period of time. We qualify them. Then what we do is we go out and find the friend investor, that's you, to be able to purchase that house on their behalf. Then what we do is we go out and we find that location, that house, with our accredited realtors. We work through the offer stage, we work through the conditional stage, and then we work through the closing stage, and then it's all hands off from there, and we are there to help facilitate all the way to the finish line. One of the things that I talked about at the beginning that I would talk about in this module is the market demand. So if you picture what is happening in this country right now, the base for where we're kind of operating from is that there's 9 million renters in this country. So now that doesn't mean that there are 9 million renters that are looking to purchase a home, but that is the base that we're working from. Now, if you start to pare it down from there, how many are looking to transition to a home ownership? Then you pare down from there, how many look to qualify within our program because they don't qualify with traditional lenders. And so when you look at what the marketplace has to offer, when you start to look at what the barriers are now from a perspective of rental options that are available and houses that are available, what you're going to find is that there is a kind of a collision course for what Rent to Own Canada has been for the last 5 years, but there is hockey stick growth opportunities that are to come for this company. And so we really are on the cutting edge of what supporting traditional home ownership will look like in the future, not just today, but also for the next decades to come. And the reality is that renting to own is very much going to be another tool in the tool belt of people that are looking to achieve home ownership. So traditional lending, private lending, but Rent to Own Canada and renting to own with lease options, that is going to be another tool in your tool belt. The last thing I wanted to talk about in this module is that tenant first approach. The fact is that this is not a new concept. Renting to own has been around in this country for decades. It is something that is quite popular in the States, but traditionally there has been a bad name for renting to own in this country due to the fact that it is asset first. And when I say asset first, if you are a landlord, you own a property, somebody comes to you that you might think is a great tenant, you want to give them a hand up, you might say, well, give me X amount of money down as a deposit, and then over time you can save up enough money and you can buy this house for X amount of money. The challenge is that when it is done with every best intention through an asset-driven transaction, the reality is that the tenant owner hasn't been set up for success, whereby the landlord may not have all the background information on them. The math might not have been worked out properly to make sure that when they exit that they have enough money to be able to purchase. And what ends up inevitably happening, and what has happened for decades, is that when it's an asset first driven model whereby there's no program around it, inevitably the tenant owner is set up to fail without them realizing it, or without the landlord realizing it. And so because it's developed a bit of a bad name in this country over the last few decades, what we decided to do as part of our programming is turn that on its head. And so instead of being asset driven, we are tenant first driven. And what that means is that we are going out and we are working to find those appropriate tenant owners, making sure that they can qualify, making sure that they're set up for success. And then once we find the tenant owner and we can bring the friend investor into the picture, that's when we go out and start looking for the asset. Because we know that being tenant driven first and tenant first in our thinking will result in that positive outcome for the friend investor and their investments on that asset. So, in summary, I gave you an overview of how it works with tenant owners with their leases in place and the options to purchase in place. I gave you an overview of our business model and how we are operating. I reviewed the nomenclature and how we talk: tenant owner, friend investor, partners of excellence all across the country. From the market demand perspective, we have never been in a better position to be ramping up a program like this, because folks do need another tool in their tool belt to be able to achieve success. And we are taking a tenant first approach to this as opposed to an asset first driven approach, which best works to set the tenant owner up for success, because we've qualified them, we put them in the best position possible, and at the same time, the friend investor or the landlord is perfectly aligned to say, yes, this is what you're coming in for, this is how much it is per month, and this is what your exit price is, and everybody's on the same page because we've delivered on that transparency and the trust within the business model. So on the next module, we're going to be discussing is why you should be investing in rent to own Canada, and why you should be a friend investor. We'll talk soon.